The woman sitting at the kitchen table in the dead of night wasn't always this way. Hunched over papers, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched an envelope marked foreclosure. Her name was Sofia Alvarez, a Latina entrepreneur who had built her empire from nothing but grit, determination, and the unshakable belief that she could rise above the limitations life had placed before her. To look at her now, one might think she was just another business owner drowning under the weight of financial pressures. But Sofia was far more than that. She was a force of nature, a woman whose journey through life had been paved with both triumphs and scars. Sofia's story began decades earlier, in a small apartment nestled in the heart of East Los Angeles. Her parents, immigrants from Mexico, worked tirelessly to provide for their family. Her father spent his days fixing cars in a garage that smelled perpetually of oil and sweat, while her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families on the other side of town. They were proud people, though they rarely spoke about the sacrifices they made. Instead, they instilled in Sofia and her siblings the importance of hard work, resilience, and education. From a young age, Sofia understood that opportunities wouldn't simply fall into her lap. She would have to fight for them. Growing up, Sofia watched her parents struggle to keep their tiny corner store afloat. It was a modest operation, a cramped space filled with canned goods, snacks, and household essentials. But it was also a lifeline for the community. People came not only to buy necessities, but to share stories, seek advice, or simply feel connected to something greater than themselves. For Sofia, the store became a symbol of hope and perseverance, even when times were tough. Yet as much as she admired her parents' dedication, she vowed never to live a life constrained by such narrow margins. She wanted more, not just for herself, but for her family. Her ambitions took shape during high school, where she excelled academically despite the challenges of balancing studies with part-time jobs. While many of her peers dreamed of careers in medicine or law, Sofia found herself drawn to the world of entrepreneurship. There was something intoxicating about the idea of creating something from scratch, of building a legacy that could outlast her. After graduating at the top of her class, she earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, where she studied business administration. Those years were grueling, marked by sleepless nights and countless cups of coffee consumed in dimly lit libraries. But Sofia thrived on the challenge, fueled by the knowledge that every step forward brought her closer to achieving her dreams. After college, Sofia returned to East Los Angeles, determined to make her mark. At first, she worked for a series of startups, learning the ins and outs of running a business while honing her skills in marketing and finance. But deep down, she knew she wasn't meant to climb someone else's ladder. She wanted to build her own. So, with little more than a shoestring budget and a head full of ideas, she launched her first venture, a boutique catering company specializing in authentic Mexican cuisine. The early days were fraught with uncertainty. She often found herself juggling multiple roles, chef, delivery driver, accountant, all while trying to secure clients and grow her brand. But Sofia's relentless drive paid off. Within a few years, her company had expanded beyond catering to include a line of packaged foods sold in local grocery stores. By the time she turned 35, she was running a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Despite her professional success, Sofia's personal life was far more complicated. Her marriage to Daniel, a former police officer, had once been a source of strength and stability. When they first met, it seemed like fate. Sofia was attending a community event aimed at bridging the gap between law enforcement and residents, and Daniel stood out immediately. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a quiet confidence that drew people to him. More importantly, he shared Sofia's passion for giving back to the community. Over time, their relationship blossomed, rooted in mutual respect and admiration. They married in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family, vowing to support each other no matter what challenges lay ahead. But life had a way of testing those vows. As Sophia's career skyrocketed, Daniel faced mounting difficulties in his own profession. A decorated officer known for his integrity, he became embroiled in a corruption scandal that rocked the department. Though he was innocent, the fallout left him disillusioned and emotionally scarred. Unable to continue working in law enforcement, he decided to open a sporting goods store aimed at providing affordable equipment to underserved youth. It was a noble endeavor, but one that proved financially unsustainable. The strain of Daniel's struggles weighed heavily on their marriage, leading to arguments and misunderstandings. Sophia, caught up in the whirlwind of her growing business, sometimes felt guilty for not being able to offer more support. Meanwhile, Daniel wrestled with feelings of inadequacy, convinced that he had failed both as a husband and as a provider. Through it all, Sophia remained fiercely loyal to Daniel, even when their relationship grew strained. Beneath her polished exterior lay a woman who carried the weight of unresolved guilt and regret. She loved Daniel deeply, but their differences had created cracks in their foundation. Still, she refused to give up on him or on them. That love, however imperfect, was what drove her to sit at the kitchen table late at night, poring over documents and brainstorming ways to save his store. Because for Sophia, this wasn't just about saving a business, it was about saving the man she had promised to stand by no matter what. As the hours ticked by and the room grew colder, Sophia realized that the decision before her was monumental. Could she risk everything she had worked so hard to achieve in order to salvage what remained of Daniel's dream? And if she did, would it be enough to mend the fractures in their marriage? These questions swirled in her mind like storm clouds, heavy with the promise of rain. Yet amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear. Sofia Alvarez was not a woman who backed down from a challenge. Whatever path lay ahead, she would face it head-on, with courage, determination, and an unwavering belief in the power of redemption. Daniel Alvarez was not the kind of man who sought attention. In fact, he preferred to stay in the shadows, letting his actions speak louder than words. But even those who barely knew him could sense that there was something extraordinary about him, a quiet strength that seemed unshakable until life tested it in ways no one could have predicted. To understand Daniel fully, one had to go back to the beginning, to the days when he wore a badge and carried the weight of an entire community on his shoulders. Born and raised in East Los Angeles, Daniel grew up in a neighborhood where danger lurked around every corner. His father, a mechanic, worked long hours to provide for the family, while his mother juggled multiple jobs as a house cleaner and babysitter. Like Sophia, Daniel learned early on the value of hard work and sacrifice. But unlike her, his path wasn't paved with dreams of entrepreneurship or ambition-driven goals. Instead, Daniel found purpose in service. From a young age, he admired the police officers who patrolled his streets, not because they were perfect, but because they represented order in a chaotic world. When Daniel graduated from high school, he joined the academy without hesitation. Becoming a police officer wasn't just a career choice for him, it was a calling. He believed wholeheartedly in the idea of protecting others, of being a shield against the darkness that threatened to consume his community. For years, he excelled in his role, earning commendations for bravery and integrity. He became known as the officer who went above and beyond, whether it was mentoring at-risk youth, organizing community outreach programs, or simply taking the time to listen to someone in need. To many, Daniel was a hero, but heroes are rarely immune to tragedy. The incident that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. Daniel and his partner, Marcus, responded to a call about a suspected burglary at a local warehouse. What they didn't know was that the situation was far more complex than it appeared. The warehouse was owned by a powerful businessman with ties to organized crime, and the so-called burglars were actually whistleblowers attempting to expose corruption within the company. When Daniel discovered the truth, he faced an impossible choice: follow orders and arrest the whistleblowers, effectively silencing them, or defy protocol and risk his career, and possibly his life, to do what was right. In the end, Daniel chose justice over compliance. With Marcus's reluctant support, he helped the whistleblowers escape and reported the corruption to Internal Affairs. But doing the right thing came at a steep cost. The businessman retaliated by launching a smear campaign against Daniel, accusing him of misconduct and fabricating evidence to discredit him. Though an investigation eventually cleared Daniel of wrongdoing, the damage was done. His reputation was tarnished, his trust in the system shattered. Unable to return to a department that had turned its back on him, Daniel resigned. For months after leaving the force, Daniel struggled to find his footing. The transition from police officer to civilian life was harder than he anticipated. He missed the camaraderie of his fellow officers, the sense of purpose that came with wearing the uniform. More than anything, he missed feeling like he mattered. Without that identity, he felt adrift, unsure of who he was or what he was meant to do next. The trauma of the incident lingered too, manifesting in nightmares and flashbacks that left him restless and irritable. Over time, these symptoms evolved into full-blown PTSD, further complicating his already fragile mental state. It was during this dark period that Daniel conceived the idea for his sporting goods store. Inspired by memories of coaching youth basketball leagues in his spare time, he envisioned a space where kids from underserved communities could access affordable equipment and training. It wasn't just about sports, it was about giving them hope, showing them that they had potential beyond the challenges they faced. At first, the store thrived. Families flocked to it, grateful for the opportunity to enroll their children in programs that would otherwise be out of reach. Daniel poured his heart into the business, working tirelessly to ensure its success. But running a small business proved to be more difficult than he imagined. Rising rent, unexpected repairs, and dwindling customer traffic slowly eroded his profits. Despite his best efforts, the store began hemorrhaging money. Each setback chipped away at Daniel's confidence, reinforcing the feelings of inadequacy that had plagued him since leaving the force. He tried to hide his struggles from Sophia, ashamed of failing yet again. But the stress seeped into their marriage, manifesting in arguments over finances and unresolved tensions. What made matters worse was Daniel's stubborn pride. He refused to ask for help, even when it became clear that he couldn't keep the store afloat on his own. To him, accepting assistance felt like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that he wasn't strong enough to carry the burden alone. This mindset created a rift between him and Sophia, who often felt shut out of his struggles. She wanted to be there for him, to share the load, but Daniel's walls were impenetrable. Yet beneath his stoic exterior lay a man who still loved Sophia deeply. Their relationship may have been strained, but Daniel never stopped believing in the bond they shared. He remembered the early days of their marriage when they stood side by side, united in their mission to make a difference. He remembered how Sophia had supported him during the darkest moments of the corruption scandal, standing by his side when others had turned their backs. And though he sometimes resented her success, feeling overshadowed by her achievements, he also admired her tenacity and drive. As the foreclosure notice loomed over him, Daniel wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt defeated, convinced that he had failed not only himself but also Sophia and the community he had hoped to serve. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the flicker of hope that remained. If anyone could turn things around, it was Sophia. She had always been a fighter, someone who refused to let obstacles stand in her way. Part of him wanted to reach out, to lean on her strength and wisdom. But another part, the part shaped by years of self-reliance and pride, resisted the idea, fearing that asking for help would make him less of a man. This internal conflict consumed Daniel, leaving him torn between vulnerability and resilience. He knew that Sophia was aware of his struggles. She had seen the late-night phone calls from creditors, the sleepless nights spent staring at spreadsheets. Yet she hadn't pushed him to open up, respecting his need for space even as her concern grew. That balance between distance and intimacy defined their relationship now, a delicate dance of give and take that neither of them had fully mastered. Still, Daniel couldn't deny the impact Sophia had on his life. Even in their most challenging moments, she reminded him of who he used to be, a man of honor, a protector, a provider. Whether or not he admitted it aloud, he needed her, not just as a partner, but as a lifeline. Because if anyone could save his store, and perhaps even salvage their marriage, it was her. The sporting goods store wasn't just a business, it was the beating heart of East Los Angeles. For years, it had served as a sanctuary for families who otherwise felt forgotten by the world. To walk through its doors was to step into a space where dreams were nurtured, where potential was recognized, and where hope found a foothold amidst adversity. And while Daniel may have been the face of the operation, the store's true power lay in the lives it touched, the people who depended on it, believed in it, and saw it as more than just a place to buy equipment. Among those who frequented the store was Maria Lopez, a single mother whose life had been transformed by Daniel's programs. Maria worked double shifts at a diner to make ends meet, often leaving her teenage son Javier to fend for himself after school. When Javier began getting into trouble, skipping classes, hanging out with the wrong crowd, Maria feared she was losing him. Then she heard about the free basketball clinics offered at Daniel's store. Desperate for anything that might steer Javier back on track, she signed him up. At first, Javier resisted. He didn't see the point of spending his afternoons dribbling a ball when he could be hanging out with his friends. But over time, something shifted. Under Daniel's guidance, Javier discovered a talent he never knew he had. More importantly, he found a sense of belonging. The store became a second home, a place where he felt valued and supported. Thanks to the discipline and confidence he gained from playing basketball, Javier's grades improved, and he started setting goals for his future. Now at 17, he dreamed of earning a scholarship to college, a dream that once seemed impossible, but now felt within reach. For Maria, the store represented more than just an opportunity for her son. It symbolized hope. She often lingered in the aisles after picking up Javier, chatting with other parents or browsing the shelves for bargains. Sometimes she'd catch Daniel organizing equipment or helping a customer, and she'd feel a pang of gratitude. Without this place and without Daniel, she wasn't sure where her family would be today. So when rumors of the store's impending closure began circulating, Maria felt a knot form in her stomach. Losing the store wouldn't just mean losing access to affordable gear, it would mean losing a lifeline. Then there was Carlos Rivera, a shy teenager who worked part-time at the store. At 19, Carlos was already carrying the weight of adult responsibilities. His father had passed away unexpectedly 2 years earlier, leaving his mother to raise 4 children on her own. Determined to help ease the financial burden, Carlos juggled school and work, saving every penny he earned toward his dream of attending community college. Working at the store wasn't glamorous. He spent most of his shifts restocking shelves or cleaning up, but it gave him a sense of purpose. Plus, Daniel treated him like family, offering advice and encouragement whenever Carlos needed it. Carlos admired Daniel deeply. In many ways, the older man reminded him of his late father, hardworking, compassionate, and fiercely loyal to those he cared about. Watching Daniel struggle to keep the store afloat broke Carlos's heart. He knew how much the business meant to Daniel, not just financially, but emotionally. It was a testament to everything Daniel stood for: resilience, service, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to succeed. One evening, as Carlos was closing up shop, he overheard a conversation between Daniel and a representative from the bank. The words foreclosure and deadline sent a chill down his spine. After the banker left, Carlos approached Daniel hesitantly. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are they really going to take the store away?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Carlitos," he admitted. "I'm doing everything I can, but—" His voice trailed off, heavy with unspoken fears. Carlos nodded, though his mind was racing. He couldn't let this happen. Not to Daniel, not to the kids who relied on the store's programs, and certainly not to himself. If the store closed, he'd lose his job, and with it, any chance of pursuing his education. That night, as he walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, Carlos resolved to do whatever it took to help Daniel save the business. But Daniel and Carlos weren't the only ones invested in the store's survival. Across town, a wealthy businessman named Victor Morales had been quietly circling the property like a vulture. Victor owned several lucrative businesses in East Los Angeles, including parking lots, strip malls, and luxury condos. To him, the neighborhood represented untapped potential, a gold mine waiting to be exploited. And Daniel's store? It was nothing more than an eyesore standing in the way of progress. Victor had made multiple offers to buy the property, each one higher than the last. But Daniel refused to sell, even as his debts mounted. The rejection infuriated Victor, who prided himself on getting what he wanted. To him, Daniel was a relic of a bygone era, a stubborn idealist clinging to outdated notions of community and compassion. Victor couldn't understand why anyone would prioritize sentimental value over profit. What Victor didn't realize, however, was that Daniel's resistance wasn't born out of naivety. It was rooted in principle. Selling the store would mean betraying the very people he had sworn to serve, the same people who had supported him during his darkest days. For Daniel, walking away wasn't an option. Still, Victor wasn't one to give up easily. When persuasion failed, he resorted to intimidation. He hired lawyers to challenge the store's zoning permits, filed frivolous complaints with city officials, and spread rumors designed to drive customers away. These tactics weren't new. Victor had used them countless times before to force smaller businesses into bankruptcy, and usually they worked. But Daniel wasn't like the others. He had Sophia, and, unbeknownst to Victor, he also had allies within the community. People like Maria and Carlos weren't about to stand idly by while a greedy developer dismantled the foundation of their neighborhood. Together they formed an unlikely coalition, determined to fight back against Victor's predatory practices. As tensions escalated, the store became a battleground, not just for Daniel and Sophia, but for everyone who believed in the power of unity over greed. Each person brought something unique to the table. Maria organized petitions and rallied support from local parents. Carlos scoured public records, searching for evidence of Victor's unethical behavior, and Sophia used her connections to amplify their message, drawing attention to the injustice unfolding in their midst. Through it all, the store remained a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, ordinary people could come together to achieve extraordinary things. It wasn't just a building filled with equipment. It was a symbol of resilience, perseverance, and the unbreakable bonds that held a community together. And for Sophia, standing shoulder to shoulder with Daniel and the others, reignited a spark she hadn't felt in years. As she watched the grassroots movement grow, she realized that saving the store wasn't just about preserving a business or salvaging a marriage. It was about proving that love, whether for a person, a place, or an idea, was worth fighting for. The weight of the situation pressed down on Sophia like a storm cloud, refusing to break. Every morning, she woke up with the same gnawing question in her mind: how far am I willing to go? Saving Daniel's store wasn't just a financial decision. It was an emotional reckoning, one that forced her to confront unresolved feelings about their marriage, her own ambitions, and the legacy she wanted to leave behind. But as the days slipped away and the foreclosure deadline loomed closer, Sophia knew she couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. Her first step was meeting with the bank, a task she approached with the same meticulous preparation she brought to every aspect of her life. Armed with spreadsheets, financial projections, and a carefully crafted proposal, she walked into the sterile conference room determined to negotiate an extension. The banker, a middle-aged man with a perpetually furrowed brow, listened politely, but offered little encouragement. "Ms. Alvarez," he said finally, his tone tinged with regret, "we've already extended every courtesy we can. Unless Mr. Alvarez can provide significant collateral or repayment within the next 2 weeks, we'll have no choice but to proceed with the foreclosure." Sophia nodded, masking her frustration behind a practiced smile. She had expected resistance, but hearing the words aloud made the reality feel suffocating. 2 weeks, 14 days to save a business that had been teetering on the brink for months. It seemed impossible, and yet Sophia thrived under pressure. As she left the bank, her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Can we talk tonight?" The message was brief, but Sophia could read between the lines. He was ready to face what had long been unsaid between them. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. That evening, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where Sophia had spent countless sleepless nights poring over documents. The air was heavy with unspoken truths, but neither of them shied away. "I know you've been trying to fix this," Daniel began, his voice rough with emotion, "and I haven't made it easy for you. I've let my pride get in the way, and for that, I'm sorry." Sophia reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "We're in this together, Daniel," she said softly, "but we need to be honest with each other. What happens if we can't save the store?" Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening, as he wrestled with the question. "Then I lose more than just a business," he admitted. "I lose a part of myself, and I lose the trust of everyone who believed in me." The vulnerability in his voice struck Sophia like a punch to the gut. She had always known how much the store meant to him, but hearing him say it aloud made it undeniable. This wasn't just about money. It was about identity, purpose, and redemption. Determined to find a solution, Sophia turned her attention to Victor Morales. If they were going to beat him, they needed leverage, and Carlos Rivera might have stumbled upon exactly what they needed. Earlier that week, while combing through public records, Carlos had uncovered something suspicious. Several former tenants of Victor's properties claimed they had been coerced into selling their businesses through threats and harassment. Though none of the allegations had resulted in formal charges, the pattern was damning. When Carlos presented his findings to Sophia, her eyes lit up with a mix of anger and determination. "This is it," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "If we can prove that Victor has been using illegal tactics to force people out, we can expose him, and maybe even stall the foreclosure." But gathering evidence wouldn't be easy. Many of the victims were too afraid to come forward, fearing retaliation. So Sophia devised a plan. She would personally visit each of them, offering support and reassurance. Her reputation as a successful entrepreneur carried weight, and many agreed to speak with her once they realized she was fighting for the same cause. One such person was Rosa Mendez, the owner of a small bakery that had been demolished to make way for one of Victor's parking lots. Rosa recounted how Victor's lawyers had bombarded her with lawsuits, claiming code violations that didn't exist. When she refused to sell, they escalated their tactics, spreading false rumors that drove customers away. Eventually, overwhelmed and exhausted, Rosa had no choice but to give in. Listening to Rosa's story, Sophia felt a surge of rage, not just at Victor, but at the system that allowed men like him to exploit others without consequence. She vowed to use Rose's testimony, along with those of others, to build a case against him. Meanwhile, tensions between Sophia and Daniel continued to simmer. While Sophia threw herself into the fight, Daniel struggled with feelings of inadequacy. He hated relying on her, hated seeing her shoulder the burden he felt responsible for. One night, after another heated argument, he stormed out of the house, unable to contain his frustration. Sophia watched him go, her heart aching with a mixture of love and exasperation. She understood his pain, his fear of being perceived as weak, but she also knew that pushing him away wouldn't solve anything. That's when she decided to take a different approach. The next day, she invited Daniel to join her at a community meeting organized by Maria Lopez. Dozens of residents packed into the local recreation center, eager to discuss strategies for saving the store. As Sophia stood at the front of the room, addressing the crowd with passion and conviction, Daniel observed quietly from the back. Watching her inspire others reminded him of why he had fallen in love with her in the first place. After the meeting, Maria pulled Daniel aside. "Your wife is incredible," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "But don't forget, you're incredible too. This store wouldn't exist without you." Her words hit Daniel like a thunderclap. For so long, he had defined himself by his failures, allowing shame to overshadow his accomplishments. But listening to Maria and seeing the way people rallied around him, he began to realize that his worth wasn't tied to his ability to succeed alone. It was tied to the impact he had on others. Buoyed by this newfound clarity, Daniel resolved to step up. Together, he and Sophia devised a bold plan. They would confront Victor directly, presenting the evidence Carlos had gathered and demanding that he withdraw his offer to buy the property. It was a risky move, but Sophia believed it was their best shot. The confrontation took place in Victor's sleek downtown office, a stark contrast to the humble storefront Daniel had poured his soul into. Surrounded by glass walls and polished furniture, Victor exuded arrogance as he greeted them. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Without hesitation, Sophia laid out their case, presenting document after document, detailing his unethical practices. Victor's smug expression faltered, but only briefly. "Even if this is true," he countered, "it doesn't change the fact that your husband owes the bank a substantial amount of money. Unless you can pay it off, the store is mine." Sophia met his gaze head-on, her resolve unwavering. "We're not done fighting," she said firmly, "and neither is this community." As they left the office, Daniel placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "for believing in me, for not giving up." Sophia smiled, though her mind was already racing ahead. They had won a small victory, but the battle was far from over. To truly save the store and their marriage, they would need to dig deeper, push harder, and trust each other completely. The days following their meeting with Victor Morales were a blur of activity. Sophia and Daniel worked tirelessly, dividing responsibilities but staying in constant communication. While Sophia focused on amplifying their campaign, reaching out to local media outlets, organizing protests, and leveraging her professional network, Daniel immersed himself in revitalizing the store itself. He cleaned every corner, repaired broken shelves, and even repainted the exterior with vibrant colors donated by supportive neighbors. The transformation was symbolic as much as it was practical. The store wasn't just surviving anymore, it was fighting back. But beneath the surface, cracks began to show. The strain of balancing her own business with the demands of saving Daniel's store started taking its toll on Sophia. Late nights spent strategizing left her exhausted, and the mounting financial risks weighed heavily on her mind. She had already liquidated part of her savings to cover some of Daniel's immediate debts, but it wasn't enough. If they couldn't raise the remaining funds within the next week, all their efforts would be for nothing. One evening, as she sat alone in her Home office, staring at spreadsheets filled with numbers that refused to add up, Sophia felt a wave of doubt crash over her. Was she being reckless? What if sacrificing everything she had built still wasn't enough? And what then? Would Daniel ever forgive himself or her if they failed? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Daniel, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "I thought you could use this," he said gently, setting one mug beside her laptop. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, yet oddly comforting, a reminder that they were no longer facing this storm alone. "I'm scared, Daniel," Sophia admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we lose everything?" Daniel took a deep breath, his expression thoughtful. "Then we start over," he replied. "Together." His words caught her off guard. Gone was the prideful man who had resisted her help for so long. In his place stood someone willing to lean on her, not out of weakness, but out of trust. It was a turning point, not just for their marriage, but for the fight ahead. With renewed determination, they launched their final push. Sophia arranged a press conference outside the store, inviting reporters, community leaders, and residents to hear their story. The turnout was overwhelming. Dozens of people gathered, many carrying signs that read, "Save our store and community over greed." As Sophia stepped up to speak, the crowd fell silent, hanging on her every word. "This isn't just about a building," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "It's about a dream that belongs to everyone here. To the parents who want better futures for their children. To the kids who see this place as a second home. To the neighbors who believe in the power of unity over division." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the sea of faces before continuing. "Victor Morales may think he can buy his way into our community, but he doesn't understand what makes us strong. We are stronger together, and today we're sending a message. We won't back down." The crowd erupted into cheers, their energy electric. Cameras flashed as journalists captured the moment, ensuring the story would spread far beyond East Los Angeles. But Sophia knew that public support alone wouldn't be enough. They needed action, and fast. That night, Carlos Rivera approached Sophia with a breakthrough. After hours of digging through old files, he had uncovered a smoking gun, an email exchange between Victor and one of his lawyers explicitly discussing plans to intimidate small business owners into selling. It was concrete proof of Victor's unethical practices and potentially the key to stopping him once and for all. Sophia wasted no time. She forwarded the evidence to a trusted investigative journalist who promised to publish an exposé the following morning. Meanwhile, she reached out to the bank, requesting an emergency meeting to present the new information. The meeting was tense. Victor's representatives arrived flanked by lawyers, their expressions smug as they dismissed the allegations as baseless. But when Sophia laid out the evidence, emails, witness testimonies, and documented patterns of coercion, the room fell silent. Even the bankers, initially skeptical, seemed shaken. "We've been patient," Sophia said, her tone firm but controlled. "But now we're asking for justice. If you proceed with the foreclosure, you'll be complicit in Victor's scheme. Is that really the legacy you want to leave behind?" Her words struck a nerve. One of the senior bankers exchanged a glance with his colleagues before addressing the group. "We'll need time to review these documents," he said cautiously, "but rest assured, we take these claims very seriously. Though it wasn't a guarantee, it was a lifeline, and one they desperately needed." As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Victor, furious at being exposed, retaliated by filing a defamation lawsuit against Sophia and several community members. The legal battle threatened to drain their resources further, but Sophia refused to back down. With the help of pro bono attorneys inspired by their cause, they prepared to defend themselves in court. Meanwhile, the community rallied around them with unprecedented fervor. Fundraisers were organized, donations poured in, and volunteers transformed the store into a hub of activity. Every day brought new challenges, but also new reasons to hope. Finally, the deadline arrived. Sophia and Daniel stood outside the store, surrounded by supporters, waiting for news from the bank. When the call came, it was brief but decisive. The foreclosure had been postponed pending further investigation into Victor's practices. Relief washed over them like a tidal wave, followed quickly by gratitude for each other, for their community, and for the resilience that had carried them through. But the victory wasn't just about saving the store. It was about something deeper: redemption, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond they shared. As they embraced amidst cheers and applause, Sophia realized that they had saved more than a business. They had saved themselves. The days following the bank's decision felt surreal, as though the world had shifted slightly on its axis. For weeks, Sophia and Daniel had been consumed by the fight to save the store, every waking moment dedicated to strategizing, rallying support, and confronting adversaries. Now, with the immediate threat of foreclosure lifted, there was an odd sense of calm, like the quiet after a storm. But it wasn't silence, it was relief, gratitude, and the hum of possibility. The store itself became a symbol of resilience. Neighbors streamed in daily, not just to browse or buy equipment, but to celebrate what they had achieved together. The once dim aisles now buzzed with laughter and conversation. Parents brought their children, introducing them to the programs that had transformed lives, including Javier Lopez, who proudly showed off his basketball skills to anyone who would watch. Maria stood nearby, tears glistening in her eyes as she watched her son dribble and shoot with confidence. "This place saved him," she said to Sophia one afternoon, her voice thick with emotion, "and it saved us too." For Daniel, the victory was bittersweet. On one hand, he felt immense pride in knowing that his dream hadn't been in vain, that the store would continue to serve the community he loved. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the guilt of how close they had come to losing everything. He often found himself standing behind the counter, staring at the freshly painted walls, replaying moments from the past few months in his mind. What if Sophia hadn't stepped in? What if the community hadn't rallied around them? These questions haunted him, but they also reminded him of something crucial. He wasn't alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the store's windows, Daniel pulled Sophia aside. They sat on a bench outside, the air cool and tinged with the scent of blooming jasmine. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, the idea of starting over," Daniel began, his voice hesitant but sincere. "And I realized, maybe we already have." Sophia turned to look at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What? Do you mean?" "I mean us," he continued, gesturing between them. "We've spent so much time blaming ourselves for failing, for not being enough. But maybe the truth is that we're stronger when we face things together. Maybe saving. The store wasn't just about keeping a business alive. Maybe it was about saving us." His words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Sophia felt a lump rise in her throat as she processed what he was saying. In many ways, Daniel was right. Their journey hadn't just been about financial survival or community activism. It had been about rediscovering the foundation of their relationship. Through every argument, every sacrifice, and every moment of doubt, they had learned to trust each other again. "You're right," Sophia said finally, her voice soft but steady. "We've been given a second chance, not just with the store but with each other, and I don't want to waste it." They sat in silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. It was a rare moment of peace, one they both knew they needed to cherish. In the weeks that followed, Sophia and Daniel worked to rebuild not only the store, but their marriage. They made a conscious effort to communicate openly, sharing their fears and hopes without fear of judgment. Sophia encouraged Daniel to take pride in his accomplishments, reminding him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength. Meanwhile, Daniel supported Sophia in finding balance between her business and personal life, urging her to delegate tasks and prioritize self-care. Their efforts paid off. Slowly but surely, the cracks in their relationship began to mend. They laughed more, argued less, and rediscovered the joy of simply being together. Even small moments, like cooking dinner side by side or taking evening walks through the neighborhood, felt significant, like pieces of a puzzle falling back into place. The community noticed the change too. Where once there had been tension between Sophia and Daniel, there was now harmony. People often commented on how inspiring their partnership was, how it embodied the spirit of collaboration and perseverance that had fueled the entire movement. As for Victor Morales, his empire began to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. The exposé published by the investigative journalist sparked outrage, leading to investigations into his business practices. Several lawsuits were filed against him, forcing him to sell off properties and liquidate assets. Though justice was slow, it was undeniable, and deeply satisfying for those who had suffered under his schemes. With Victor out of the picture, the store thrived. Enrollment in Daniel's programs skyrocketed, thanks in part to Sophia's marketing expertise and the community's unwavering support. Together, they expanded the offerings, adding workshops on leadership, entrepreneurship, and even mental health awareness. The goal was simple, yet profound: to empower the next generation to dream bigger and aim higher. One particularly poignant moment came during the grand reopening ceremony. Hundreds of people gathered outside the store, which had been renamed Hope and Hustle Sporting Goods, a nod to its dual mission of fostering ambition and compassion. As Sophia and Daniel stood side by side, cutting the ribbon amid cheers and applause, Sophia couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. "This isn't just my victory," she told the crowd, her voice filled with emotion. "It's ours. Every person here played a role in making this possible, and it proves something important. When we stand together, we can overcome anything." Her words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation. But it was Daniel's speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Taking the microphone, he looked out at the sea of faces and spoke from the heart. "When I opened this store, I wanted to give back to a community that had given me so much," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But along the way, I forgot something crucial. That giving isn't a one-way street. You all reminded me of that. You reminded me that strength comes from connection, from love, from believing in each other even when things seem impossible." He paused, turning to Sophia and taking her hand. "And most importantly, you reminded me that no matter how broken we feel, there's always hope, as long as we have someone willing to fight alongside us." The crowd erupted into applause, but Sophia barely heard it. Her eyes locked with Daniel's, and in that moment, she knew they had truly come full circle. Months later, Sophia stood in the doorway of the store, watching as Daniel coached a groups of kids through a basketball drill. The sound of sneakers squeaking against polished wood floors filled the air, mingling with laughter and shouts of encouragement. It was a scene she never tired of witnessing, a testament to the power of resilience and unity. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Just got my acceptance letter to college." Attached was a photo of the envelope, its contents spilling out in excitement. Sophia smiled, feeling a surge of pride. Carlos wasn't the only success story. Dozens of young people had found purpose and direction through the store's programs. That night, as Sophia climbed into bed beside Daniel, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. They still faced challenges, both personal and professional, but they were ready to face them together. "Do you think we'll ever stop fighting for things?" Daniel asked sleepily, pulling her close. Sophia chuckled softly, resting her head on his shoulder. "Probably not," she replied, "but that's okay. Fighting means we care, and caring means we're alive." As they drifted off to sleep, the faint hum of the city outside served as a reminder of the world they had helped shape, a world where hope, hustle, and humanity went hand in hand. Months had passed since the grand reopening of Hope and Hustle, sporting goods, and the transformation was undeniable, not just within the store itself, but in the lives it touched. The once struggling business had become a thriving hub of activity, a beacon of hope for East Los Angeles. But more than that, it had become a symbol of resilience, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, people could come together to create something extraordinary. For Sophia and Daniel, this new chapter was about more than survival. It was about reinvention. They had fought tooth and nail to save the store, but in doing so, they had rediscovered parts of themselves they thought were lost. Sophia, who had always defined herself by her ambition and independence, learned the value of leaning on others and allowing herself to be leaned on in return. Daniel, who had carried the weight of his failures like a millstone around his neck, discovered that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a better future. Together, they had forged a partnership stronger than ever before, one rooted in trust, vulnerability, and shared purpose. The store continued to grow, evolving beyond its original mission of providing affordable sports equipment. Under Sophia's guidance, Daniel expanded the programs to include mentorship initiatives, career workshops, and even mental health resources for young people. These additions were inspired by stories like Carlos Rivera's, a testament to the ripple effect of investing in individuals. Carlos himself became a regular fixture at the store, volunteering his time to coach younger kids and share his journey with anyone who would listen. After enrolling in community college, he pursued a degree in social work, driven by a desire to give back to the community that had supported him. "This place changed my life," he often said during speeches at local events, "and now I want to help others find their path too." Other success stories emerged as well. Javier Lopez, once a troubled teen on the verge of dropping out of school, earned a scholarship to play basketball at a Division III university. His mother, Maria, credited the store with saving not just her son's future, but her family's stability. "Before this place, I didn't know where we were headed," she admitted during an interview with a local news station. "Now, I see possibilities everywhere." Even Victor Morales' downfall contributed to the store's legacy. Once his unethical practices were exposed, several former tenants of his properties banded together to form a coalition aimed at preventing similar exploitation in the future. They partnered with Sophia and Daniel to advocate for stricter regulations on developers, ensuring that small businesses and residents wouldn't fall victim to predatory tactics again. As the dust settled, Sophia and Daniel found themselves navigating uncharted territory in their marriage. For years, their relationship had been strained by pride, guilt, and unresolved tensions. But the battle to save the store had forced them to confront those issues head-on, leading to a deeper understanding of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their modest home, sipping coffee and watching the sunset, Sophia turned to Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if we hadn't gone through all of this?" she asked. Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I try not to think about it," he admitted. "But yeah, sometimes I do. Maybe we'd still be stuck in the same patterns, me feeling like I wasn't enough, you carrying the weight of everything on your shoulders. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what really matters." Sophia nodded, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "We're lucky," she said quietly. "Not everyone gets a second chance like this." Their renewed connection wasn't without challenges, of course. Running the store alongside their respective careers required constant communication and compromise. There were days when exhaustion threatened to creep back in, when old habits resurfaced and tempers flared. But unlike before, they approached these moments with patience and empathy. They reminded themselves daily that love wasn't about perfection, it was about effort. Looking ahead, Sophia and Daniel began dreaming bigger. They envisioned turning Hope and Hustle into a franchise, replicating its model in underserved communities across the country. With Sophia's business acumen and Daniel's passion for service, they believed they could scale their impact without losing sight of the values that made the store special. To fund this expansion, Sophia proposed launching a nonprofit arm of the business using donations and grants to subsidize programs for low-income families. She reached out to corporate sponsors, leveraging her network to secure partnerships with major brands eager to align themselves with a cause as inspiring as theirs. Meanwhile, Daniel focused on training a new generation of leaders, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and encouraging them to pursue their dreams, no matter how daunting they seemed. Their plans weren't limited to the store, however. On a personal level, Sophia and Daniel committed to prioritizing their relationship. They scheduled regular date nights, took weekend trips to recharge, and made a point of checking in with each other emotionally. "We've spent so much time fighting for everyone else," Sophia joked one evening. "It's time we fight for us, too." The impact of their efforts extended far beyond the walls of the store. Inspired by Sophia and Daniel's example, neighbors began organizing initiatives of their own. Community gardens, art workshops, and literacy programs sprouted up throughout East Los Angeles. The sense of solidarity that had fueled the campaign against Victor Morales persisted, creating a culture of collaboration and mutual support. Even the physical landscape of the neighborhood began to change. Vacant lots once eyed by developers were transformed into parks and recreational spaces thanks to grassroots fundraising efforts. Local businesses thrived, buoyed by increased foot traffic and a renewed sense of pride among residents. At the center of it all stood Hope and Hustle, a living testament to what could be achieved when people came together for a common cause. Its success wasn't measured in profits or accolades, but in the lives it touched and the hope it inspired. On the anniversary of the store's reopening, Sophia and Daniel hosted a celebration that brought the entire community together. As fireworks lit up the night sky and music filled the air, Sophia took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. Standing beside Daniel, surrounded by friends, family, and strangers turned allies, she felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the victories they had achieved, but for the lessons they had learned along the way. "People always talk about resilience like it's some kind of superpower," she said during a brief speech. But the truth is, it's not about being invincible. It's about finding strength in each other, even when we feel weak. It's about believing in something bigger than ourselves, even when the odds seem impossible. Her words resonated deeply, earning cheers and applause from the crowd. But as she stepped down from the stage and rejoined Daniel, she knew the real magic lay not in the applause, but in the connections they had forged, the bonds that would endure long after the festivities ended. Later that night, as the last guests departed and the streets grew quiet, Sophia and Daniel lingered outside the store. The neon sign above the door cast a warm glow, illuminating the words "Hope and Hustle" in bold letters. "You know," Daniel said, breaking the silence, "I used to think this place was just a business, something I did because I wanted to make a difference." He paused, his voice softening. "But now I realize it's more than that. It's a reminder of who we are and who we can be." Sophia smiled, reaching for his hand. "That's why it works," she replied, "because it's not just yours anymore. It's ours, and it's theirs." They stood there for a while, hand in hand, letting the significance of the moment wash over them. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. They still faced challenges, both personal and professional, but they were ready to face them together. As they walked home beneath a canopy of stars, Sophia felt a deep sense of peace. The world was vast and unpredictable, full of uncertainties and obstacles. But as long as they had each other and the community they had helped build, they knew they could weather whatever storms lay ahead.